Get yourself a cup of coffee because today we are talking about healing the inner child. We're starting with just one topic. I will define what the inner child is. I do want to point out at the top of this whole series that we are all different, and the inner child is going to be vastly different in each person based on what trauma they grew up with, if they were neglected or abused. But my point is, this is by no means a end-all be-all guide to like, you must do it this way. It's gonna vary per person, and you just need to experiment. I find experimenting is what really worked, and that's why some of my methods are kind of out there and taboo, because I experimented a lot to find what worked for me. Get yourself a plushie. You need a buddy with you, and we're tapping into the inner child. So plushies are, playful things, comfort objects. There's really nothing wrong with having those, in our world. Our society really pushes back against things like that. But I think it's vastly helpful when you're dealing with the inner child to appeal to that child's taste and to your inner child's sense of comfort. Whatever that child in you needs for comfort, just appeal to that and go for that. I like soft, warm things, like something cuddly, because there are memories in my subconscious that link to that sort of thing. So that works for me. For you, whatever it is, a blanket, but basically appeal to the child in you, because that's sort of the goal with all of this, is going back and listening to that child. So let's jump right in. All right, so let's just define what is the inner child. A lot of this goes back to Carl Jung, because he was the person who kind of coined that term. But let's just read this paragraph defining it. I'm using an online source at stepupformentalhealth.org, so you can find this there. I'll try to remember to link it in the video description, but you've got the info literally right here. But the inner child can be defined as the impressionable and vulnerable part of ourselves, wounded and shaped throughout the earliest experiences and stages of our lives. That term was originally coined by Carl Jung and recognized as an archetype for unconscious subpersonality. Its potential manifests through our behaviors and interactions with the external world. I'm trying to skim some of this. So in your adulthood, obviously, a lot of this inner child work or inner child trauma is going to come out through your behaviors. And this is why a lot of people you come across in your daily life can seem almost like neurotic and just crazy. It's because they've got a lot of broken stuff inside that they haven't ever dealt with or even looked at. So they're interacting with the world with all those issues. And I still struggle with that. All these painful past issues that are all in your subconscious, you're not consciously aware of any of it. It's all triggered by other people. And if you believe in metaphysical things, which obviously my channel is spiritual, so of course I do, you also will know that a lot of Buddhist beliefs and other spiritual beliefs say that the external world is actually just a reflection of you, because we're all one, we're all the universe sort of interacting with itself. And I'm trying to simplify, but basically the outer world is going to reflect your inner world. And if you've got these problems, the outer world, including other people, are going to trigger them. So that's another good reason that we want to heal the inner child. So it's also saying many of us try to protect ourselves from this suffering by burying these unresolved feelings and pain deep within our unconscious mind. And of course, they'll return as withdrawal, passive aggressiveness, fear of abandonment, enabling, and much more. So the goal here is to reparent the inner child. And what we're going to go over today is specifically just talking to your inner child and giving it a voice. Basically, I've found success by being both the child voice and the parent voice. And it's almost like you're role playing, but you have to do this out loud with your voice. And you can alternate voice types, almost like you're a voice actor doing character voices in a cartoon or something. For me, that's what works. Some people don't feel comfortable, they feel goofy doing that, but I will tell you that if you do it that way, it will work better, because speaking in your normal voice or even monotone voices as these different characters, it's not going to feel authentic, I guess is the best way to put it. And I'm going to go over all this, but I want to point out something on the side here. This was related to a neuroscience study for prayer. And I'm tying this into speaking in your parental voice and your child voice, because they are the same thing. When you speak to your deity through prayer. It doesn't matter what deity, it could be the Christian God or some other deity. They've already done research that shows that your brain responds, especially if you do it out loud, like you pray as if the entity is in the room with you and you use your external voice rather than your internal thought voice. Your brain responds as if there's a person there. And so I have it highlighted here, but the research has shown that prayer can reduce activity in the amygdala, which reduces feelings of anxiety and fear. Especially if you have a personality disorder that has a lot of anxiety, for example, borderline personality disorder, your amygdala can be constantly triggered with anxiety and feelings of fear. So something like prayer or talking in your parental voice to your inner child can help calm you down. Prayer also activates the reward system in the brain, which includes dopamine release, which that's been known for a while too. A lot of studies speak to that. It does also say when you pray to like a higher power, you'll feel a connection to it. But in my case, I'm relating this all to speaking to the inner child from the parental voice, and also responding as the inner child to that voice. So you kind of have a dialogue between the two. So going back to what the article had about reparenting the inner child, the process of reparenting was first introduced by Dr. Lucia Capaccion. She's an Italian American, I know that much, in the 1970s through her art therapy. She was also a graphic designer. I was researching her because of this mention of her. But anyways, yeah, she started doing child therapy related work, but it's cool that she was an artist too. Reparenting the inner child focuses on making sure it feels the value, love, and protection it lacked during childhood. And this is specifically the kind of things I was looking into for my own healing that helped. It's sort of tapping into all those things you lacked as a child, or that you were neglected from having. By working with your inner child, you can isolate and integrate a very essential part of your being. Because the inner child holds enormous power over our thoughts, decisions, and relationships, it is important to introduce it to new approaches that help lessen unruly reactions and promote reflective responses. And so they mentioned that the practices below will help with that. Consider doing the exercises when you are feeling anxious, angry, scared, or disappointed. So they're recommending actually trying this when you're triggered. I would try it before that to get a feel for how this will help you, ahead of time. Then when you are triggered, you can kind of jump right into these techniques. Yeah, that's kind of saying the same thing. Obviously, yes, I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the video. It's highly important. Obviously, get professional help and seek like a counselor or a professional to guide you through these things. But in my case, I didn't have the income for that kind of thing, and I had to just depend on my own techniques. And I think it was actually enough to help me get started and begin the process. But obviously you do want a professional if you have access to one. If you don't have the money like I didn't, you can find low income or free resources sometimes. So for me, I also want to point out what helped me was doing these types of exercises, but I was using the help of psychedelics. For legal reasons, I'm not recommending anyone use psychedelics, but if you're in a state or country where it's legal and you have access to psilocybin mushrooms, some people pronounce it psilocybin, but if you have access to magic mushrooms, there are sort of for me, they help you blast through all of the subconscious, like your subconscious mind tries to protect you and it blocks a lot of the progress. It blocks you from even knowing you have these wounds because it's trying to protect you. It's trying to protect your inner child. So for me, that was what helped me break through. It was during a usage of the psychedelics that I had it sort of click, like this is what I need, this is how I can heal. And I began speaking to myself in the parental voice and responding as the child. And it worked, like even in one sitting. So let's just start with their recommendation. It's how to start therapeutic dialogue with your inner child. The first thing they recommend is to write letters to your inner child. So they're saying get a couple of sheets of paper, a couple of envelopes, and it's not like you're going to actually send them. You don't have to do that. You just express and release a lot of these feelings. Let's see what they wrote on their example. Dear adult. So you would essentially write the letter as the child to a parent figure. Maybe they hurt you emotionally or neglected you or something along those lines. You're literally going to try to write the letter as your child self and how they felt to that person. And remember throughout this process that they're never going to see this. So there's no fear of repercussions. There's no fear that if they were abusive and you're writing about that, they're not going to see this. They're not going to respond and lash out at you. So it's to help you express yourself without the fear of being rejected or abused again just for saying how you feel. Because in a lot of cases of neglect or abuse, that's one of the issues, is you never got to have feelings, because if you did, you were either beaten for it or told that your emotions didn't matter. In my case, emotions like crying would be suppressed in some way. Well, it wasn't that I was necessarily harmed for it, but I was emotionally shut down and told essentially that it didn't matter. You know, put those emotions away. They're just a problem to be put away. So in their case, they're saying you can also address the letters to people in your life who have called your inner child to the surface, such as a mother figure, father figure, close friend, or significant other. So even a partner you could write to, you know, if you had an issue with a ex-partner or something. If someone made you feel hurt, angry, or unloved, share your inner child's side of the story. This is the space to release raw emotion without any fluff or decoration. As you write, keep in mind that you do not need to rationalize your inner child's feelings. Yeah, you don't have to worry about why you feel that way. Just say how you feel and express it to the fullest extent. Like, you're fully free. That's the whole point. Set your inner child free, allow it to completely inhabit the page in front of you. No one is judging you in this letter, so let it all out. And so that's exactly what you want to do. You also, this is sort of a side thing for people that are into metaphysical stuff, you know, magic and spirituality. You could also write this and release it by burning it, like throw it into a fire. Fire is considered purification or transmutation, so it's a way to release things. People that are trying to cut cords with old toxic lovers, they'll write to them and throw it in the fire, or they'll do the heartstring thing and burn the string apart, basically. So there's a lot of things you can do with fire as a symbol, but that's not required here. It just, if you feel like that's a safe way to write this all out and get rid of it, fire, of course, is a good way to get rid of something. So that was the letter you write to the adult. This is why they said get 2 sheets of paper. The other one is to the inner child. So you're writing to your inner child. In the letters that go out to your inner child, this is the moment to finally craft your words. Remember, you are talking to a child who will absorb your words and apply them consciously or subconsciously. This stage is all about reparenting your inner child and providing it with the affection, validation, or support it may or may not have received at an earlier age. So yeah, this is sort of your first way of talking to that inner child. In the future, after you do this exercise, like, I didn't do this because I just kind of jumped right into speaking to the child out loud, but this is a good way to just start out. So in the future, you won't really need to do the letter thing unless that works well for you. But I think this is the best way to start because you can take your time and write it all out. They're also saying you can start off by acknowledging your inner child's suffering and pain so it feels both seen and heard. Always hold space for their experience. Next, focus on clearing up any shame and guilt that the inner child carries by explaining the origin and cause of its feelings. Remind your inner child that the fault is not theirs to bear if certain needs were not always met as a child. As you bring up this past pain, assure things will be different now that you are here to protect, love, and help it grow and heal. You can also write about whether or not you've been doing enough to make your inner child feel loved or understood. I'll skip down the last one. At the end of it, you want to thank your inner child for its vulnerability, its bravery, and its strength. So you're closing out by sharing your love for the child. So for me, I kind of did all these things in a shorter vocal way while speaking to the inner child back and forth as the parent and the child. And this was like during an emotional kind of, it wasn't a breakdown, but when you're on psychedelics, you often, if you're being serious and dealing with these types of issues, you may cry. It's more of a cathartic release, a good kind of cry than a bad one. If you're the type of person that's afraid of your emotions, it might feel overwhelming. But honestly, I've never had a bad psychedelic a cry session. It's always good. But my point is, when it happened to me, and this all clicked for me during one of those sessions, I kind of just intuitively began speaking to my inner child as a parental self. I was actually becoming like a stand-in for my mother in that case. And this was all sort of metaphysical too, so I really felt it as if I was a female adult energy speaking to my child self. And I took on, all the presence of that in that moment. And so I think that's what helps the most. You do have to kind of take on the vocal tone that you would feel is a mother figure. You really are reparenting. You're replacing the parent that you actually had with this different version in your mind. It doesn't mean you're rejecting your true parent for the rest of your life, whether you hate or love them or forgive them or not for whatever happened. But it's just a way to become a more stable inner parent for yourself. And honestly, it will help you in a lot of ways you wouldn't expect, because you will feel that inner strength later as you build this over time, because you're no longer depending on this, the human parent that may have failed you over and over and over. So to me, that was one of the main benefits to doing this type of thing. It starts to build you up internally to where you're going to depend on toxic people less. You're not going to date some guy or girl that is crappy to you for years and years and years, because you'll suddenly have inner strength. So you're not depending on other people anymore to fill those holes that maybe your parental figures left or wounds that they caused. So yeah, this letter, both of these letters is probably the best way I would suggest to start. But over time, I think I would suggest start using your actual voice out loud and respond out loud as if you're both the child and the parent. And what I mean by that is simple stuff. It doesn't have to be complicated. Like the first time I broke down in tears and was trying this, I think I said things like, "It'll be okay." I would use loving terms that a parent would use for their child, like, "It'll be okay, sweetheart. It'll be okay, baby," whatever, not pet names, but like, "It'll be okay, little one." Pick a term that you would want a parent figure to call you. Whatever makes you feel actually loved and cared for and safe. Even if it's just your name, you can use your name. I think I have done that a few times now that I'm remembering, but I also would use nicknames or pet names like that, because that's just how I envisioned the parental figure being to me. So that's the thing. This is all freeform, and you don't have to follow like this text that we're reading to the T. You can sort of use different variables. You can try different things and experiment. It doesn't have to be followed like it's, schoolwork. So the last thing they wrote is that's where I wound up, but I kind of just jumped straight to this part, the communicate out loud. So in this exercise, you can either sit or stand in front of a mirror or sit comfortably without one. If using a mirror, directly speak with your reflection, asking questions and answering them freely without restraint. If you feel strained or upset, comfort your reflection. Speak words you would want to hear from someone you love. And that was sort of what I did as the parent figure. You sort of find ways to reassure yourself, and you're going to have to say things that feel dumb to say out loud at first if you're not used to this, especially for a lot of us who have never heard these things. It's almost crazy that some kids grow up with a parent who's literally saying things like, "Oh, I love you, sweetie. You do so good at this or that. Like, everything's going to be okay. You can trust." It's like all that stuff feels weird to me to say, because I never heard those kinds of things. But once you start saying them as your parental voice, it will get more and more natural, but also it will feel really good. It'll feel reassuring. Your goal should be to get to a point where you believe it, because at first you're not going to. You're going to be like, "God, this is dumb," or "It feels weird to do this." But like I said, for me, I was on psychedelics and they helped me break through that barrier of feeling dumb, because you intuitively know what is actually truly good for you spiritually when you're using psychedelics in a safe way. So I kind of fast forwarded through those barriers of like feeling dumb about it, because I just got to a point where I was like, I've got to heal this, and I know I need to. It felt natural in that moment. But if you feel that roadblock of like, this is goofy, just push through it and keep doing it until you feel natural about it. At some point, your brain is going to respond and be like, oh, I do feel safer now. Like, I like hearing that. Like at some point it'll help. And if you're not able to get there on your own, like I said, psychedelics can help. I'm not telling anyone to use psychedelics if they're in a place where it's not legal. But for me, that's what it took to break through that barrier. I left off right here. They said, speak words you never heard as a child but desperately needed to hear. Yeah. Say exactly what your inner child needs to hear right now. Remember, you are reparenting your inner child. Soothe its spirit so that yours can also find some kind of peace and resolve. You can also consider meditating to further communicate and connect with the inner child. Fortunately, there's tons of resources for that. Yeah, you can use YouTube for a lot of meditation techniques. Meditation is vastly helpful, so always, even outside of reparenting, just for general life stuff, it's helpful to ground yourself. Okay, so the last couple of things, they say to journal as your inner child and as the parent adult. So once again, similar to the letters, except you're going to be journaling. For this exercise, consider using your non-dominant hand. If you're right-handed, use your left hand. So it's a totally different feel, basically. And use your dominant hand for the adult side. So child is your non-dominant hand, adult is your dominant hand, whichever it is for you. According to Dr. Lucia, who we mentioned earlier, this technique provides access to the right side of the brain, which has strong connections with our intuition and emotional expression. Think of the non-dominant hand as a child who is still learning to crawl or walk. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense logically, just the way that would feel. But reparenting your child requires a dialogue filled with patience and understanding, so make sure to take your time. Yeah. I mean, in general, this is all something you want to be gentle and patient with. There's no rush here. It's going to be a lifelong thing. There's no point, I don't think, where I'm ever going to be like, oh, I'm fully healed. You know, my inner child's fully healed. I'm done. Time to just continue on through life like nothing's wrong. Because it's a lifelong challenge. Spirituality in general is a lifelong challenge. So there is no done. There's no mastery. Anyone who claims to be like a guru or a master, they've completely missed the mark. This journey is eternal, basically. So don't feel discouraged no matter where you are on this path. Speak through artistic or creative expression. Yeah, draw, sing, dance is something, you know, I'm a reserved person in public. I dance a little bit sometimes. Maybe if I'm in the right mindset, I'll dance. But in general, I haven't been in touch with the dance side of my body for most of my life. And I've found, once again, on psychedelics, that body movement is insanely helpful. Like, the amount of energy it releases in your body and the amount of energy it sort of gives you and fills you up with is very helpful. So it's like your body has spent a lot of its life not expressing, and dance is literally physical expression of, you know, however you feel, how alive and happy you can be. So dance is super helpful. Playing an instrument also. Yes, music. I find music helpful. Obviously, I have a bunch of synthesizers and keyboards. Like, for me, just playing music, ambient music, can be very relaxing and expressive. So if you're more into art, try that. Crafting even. It doesn't have to be like a world-class painting or something. Just doodle, you know, if that's... In fact, I mentioned Loodles when I was doing my BDSM video, which is people who... It's sort of in the kink community, but not all of them are into it for sexual reasons. But it's people who like to play or role play as a child, basically. That's the short version of it. It's deeper than that, but a lot of them like to color. Like, that's their thing. They like to color and watch cartoons and get into the mindset of their child self. I think there is something therapeutic about that. So if for you doodling while in the mindset of your inner child works, try that. You know, there's a million things you can try. What made your eyes light up when you were a child? See, they're literally what I just said. If you liked doodling as a child or playing the piano or something, whatever it was, collecting rocks, I don't know, go outside and play like you're a child. You have to kind of experiment. So what brought you inspiration, excitement, release? Any activity that pulls you into a creative space where you can get lost and also be found when you are ready. So it's all about finding what worked for you. They're talking about using art, dance, music therapy. Yeah, stimulating the mind-body connection, basically. So I really do think creativity of any type, whatever it is for you that allows you to create from your mind, that's like a huge thing, because our culture, especially in America, really pushes back against creativity. Even nowadays, some creativity is accepted, but only if it's in the form of content churned out on social media or YouTube for people to watch. So even creativity is now being monetized, unfortunately. Try to avoid all that. Just enjoy the play. So they're also saying set play dates with your inner child. Allow yourself to engage in activities you enjoyed doing as a child. Once again, going back to just activities that stimulate that inner child. Playfulness is really important, lightheartedness, curiosity, and tenderness. Yeah. Basically, all the things that modern society suppresses as an adult, that's what you need to do. You're literally pushing back against all of that. And it's crazy. Like, our society really does want you to suppress everything. Like the brightest parts of your soul, they want you to suppress, and then they want you to buy products to fill the hole that they created. It's a whole other video topic, but it's crazy how our society runs things, and it's built almost deliberately to crush your inner child and then sell you things to fill the hole back up. But anyways, consider making a list of all the shows, films, books, and activities you used to love as a child. And then, for example, try rewatching some of those shows, or cracking open a book that pulls you into an entirely different world. Frolic in a field, visit a amusement park, a museum too, I guess, or hit the batting cages. You can climb trees like a spider monkey, roll down hills like a snowball, etc. Basically, yeah, don't be afraid to be silly. That's one thing they're kind of pointing out here. This process doesn't have to be this big, heavy, dark thing. Yes, for a lot of us, it's coming from dark trauma and neglect and sad things as a child, but the process of healing doesn't have to all be so serious. Like, you kind of weave your way through serious times and playful times. And once again, like I'm going to say a million times, psychedelics will help with navigating all that in a way that's it's gentle, but it also won't let you keep putting it aside. That's the reason I like psychedelics in a spiritual sense. They won't let you hide any longer, but they also aren't so forceful that they hurt your feelings to go through these things. It's just the right balance of moving you forward through healing, but also not letting you go backwards, or at least encouraging you not to. Because without that help, for some people, you'll go your whole life taking one step forward and two steps back, because your subconscious mind will try to protect you with really messed up, dumb ideas. Like, it's just our caveman brain tries to protect us in horrible ways. So yeah, at the end, they're just saying, just start the process. And like I said, the best thing I've found, I think in general for most people to start with, is this letter writing section they mentioned. So start, writing as the child to the adult, and then write to the inner child as the ideal version of your parent. Don't write as the parent that's bad to you. Write as your own new reparent, basically your own version of the best parent you could possibly have. Write to that child as the amazing parent that you would have wanted. So, and then the next step that they mentioned was, after that letter phase, however many times you want to repeat that till you feel comfortable, then start communicating out loud in those same voices. That's basically, just for this first video, that's my main goal and point here, is those two things. Start with the letters, move to the voice, and then they went further with activities that you can do to help take that further. But just for starters, if you haven't done any inner child work, those two things I think will do wonders. And the suggestion I had of psychedelics for pushing through, if you find this very hard, helped me. I will say, be careful with that stuff, especially if you are on, if you're on any SSRI medications. You already know this most likely, but you can't take psychedelics when you're on certain medications, because they affect the same serotonin receptors. the psychedelics do, and that can lead to problems. I think the main takeaway here is that for a lot of this, the suppression that our society forces on us is part 2 of the problem. Part 1 of the problem is just the trauma that we incurred as a child from neglect or abuse. But society definitely forces us to kind of push it all away, to grow up and just get a job and start churning out work for the big machine. So I think a big part of this is learning to break away from that and be okay breaking that status quo, because you really do have to kind of set yourself apart from society to start this journey, because most people aren't able to do this and they won't understand it. Like if I try to talk about inner child work to the average person at a club or something, it's totally beyond them, and they'll scoff at it or think it's stupid or weird or taboo. They're stuck in that phase of escaping these deep-rooted traumas and feelings from childhood by just, you know, partying and drinking, and they feel something missing in themselves, and they think going out and having sex and drinking and doing drugs, like that's all gonna be what fills the hole. Obviously it doesn't. I've already lived that life. It never does anything positive. So trying to explain to the average Joe in society who is filling their holes with buying the next new car or drinking or whatever, they won't even get it. So you have to be willing to kind of separate yourself from that to do this stuff. But anyways, I don't want to ramble too much, but in the next couple of videos, I will talk about some of the more specific things I did that helped me. So those videos will probably be shorter. This was such a long one because it's kind of getting into all of this from the top. For now, like I said, start with the letter writing and move on from there. But until next time, guys, I will see you later. Hug your plushies and don't worry about the seriousness of all this. Just keep pushing forward, because this is step 1 and this will make everything else much easier. As you go forward, it gets better every day. So the goal here is to just start letting your inner child get some of that pent up energy out. It's almost like it's been choked and unable to speak for decades, or, you know, however long you've been alive. So you've got to just start letting some of that pressure out. And as you do, things will get better and better. And I wish you all very positive results from all this. I think it will really help. So until the next video, I will see you guys later. Bye bye.